So, this is a story about some incredible persistence, a really tough choice, and a legacy that honestly people still debate today. We're going to go right to the source, an ancient Buddhist text, to figure out how the very first order of nuns actually got started.
Okay, so the source we're digging into for this explainer is called the Sutra of the Account of Gautami. It's a text from the Chinese Buddhist canon, and it gives us this direct, and believe me, often dramatic, play-by-play of how the first Buddhist nun was ordained.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? What did it actually take to become the first Buddhist nun? And as you're about to see, the answer, well, it's a lot more complicated and way more dramatic than you'd probably think.
All right, so our story kicks off with this incredibly determined woman. Her name is Mahāpajāpatī Gautamī. And listen, she wasn't just some random follower. No, she was the Buddha's aunt. And after his mother died, she became his foster mother. I mean, she raised him, and she had a huge request to make.
So she goes right up to the Buddha and asks this question, and it was a total game changer at the time. She basically wants to know, hey, is it possible for women to do what the men are doing? Can we also leave the household life and be ordained?
And what does the Buddha say? A hard no. He tells her, stop, Gautami. It is not to be. He just completely shuts her down. But here's the thing about Gautami. She doesn't back down. The sutra says she asks him again. He rejects her a second time. She asks a third time, and for a third time, he just flat out refuses.
But even after that third no, a totally heartbroken Gautami still doesn't give up. In fact, her very public despair is what leads to this huge turning point in the story. It's when another key player decides to step in.
And wow, the text paints such a vivid picture here. It describes her just standing outside the gate where the Buddha is staying. Her feet are unwashed, she's covered in dust, and she's just weeping. I mean, her grief, her determination, it's all right there, out in the open for everyone to see.
And you know what? It works. The Buddha's closest attendant, a man named Ānanda, sees her like this. He sees the Buddha's own foster mother in so much pain, and it just hits him hard. He decides, okay, I've got to do something. I have to step in.
So what happens next isn't just a simple ask. It's more like a high-stakes negotiation. Ānanda goes to the Buddha, and what unfolds is this incredible conversation that pits, compassion and logic on one side against this really deep-seated concern for the future of the teachings on the other.
Ānanda basically becomes Gautami's lawyer here. He starts pleading her case, laying out all the reasons for her ordination. But the Buddha, he doesn't just say no again. Instead, he starts laying out these serious warnings about what he thinks is really on the line.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the contrast in their arguments. Ānanda comes at it from two angles. First, he makes this emotional appeal, right? He reminds the Buddha, hey, this is the woman who raised you. And then he makes a logical argument, getting the Buddha to agree that, yes, women are perfectly capable of spiritual attainment. But the Buddha's response is fascinating. He uses these really powerful metaphors. He warns that letting women in would be like having a house with way too many women and not enough men. It can't prosper. Or it's like a beautiful field of ripe rice getting totally ruined by a sudden hailstorm. He's saying this could really damage the future of his teachings.
So, despite these really serious concerns, Ānanda's persistence pays off. It works. The Buddha finally gives in and agrees that women can be ordained. But, and this is a huge but, this victory comes with a major catch. And that catch is the price of admission, you could say. It's what the text calls the 8 heavy dharmas, or the 8 heavy rules. And these were totally non-negotiable. Gautami and every single woman who came after her would have to accept these rules for life. So, what are these rules? Well, the main point, according to the text, was to set up a really clear hierarchy. Basically, they put the new order of nuns, the Bhikkhuni Sangha, in a position where they were always permanently ranked below the order of monks. Okay, let's look at a couple of examples so you can see what this really meant. For instance, the rules said that nuns had to get instruction from monks every half month. And then there's this one, which is just wild. The 8th rule says that a nun, even if she's been ordained for 100 years, has to bow down to a monk who was just ordained that same day. 100 years! So when Ānanda takes these really demanding rules back to Gautami, her reaction is just incredible. She doesn't even hesitate.
She uses this beautiful metaphor, saying she accepts these rules like someone would joyfully accept a beautiful flower garland and place it on their head. She promises to uphold them her entire life. For her, it was simple. That was the price she had to pay. And just like that, with her acceptance, the Order of Nuns was officially created. But the story doesn't end there on that happy, triumphant note. Nope. The sutra wraps up with a pretty dark prophecy from the Buddha, where he reveals what he believes is the ultimate cost of his decision. So after Gautami accepts the rules, the Buddha turns back to Ānanda. And he says, "Remember those metaphors I used earlier about the house and the rice field? Well, now I'm going to tell you exactly what I meant." And then he lays out this really stark prediction. He directly compares how long his teachings would last in a world without nuns versus a world with them. And the Buddha's prophecy is, frankly, shocking. He tells Ānanda that without nuns, his true Dharma, his pure teaching, would have survived for a full 1,000 years. But now, because women have been ordained, it will only last for 500. So from his perspective, the price of letting women in was literally cutting the lifespan of his entire legacy in half. So that's the story the text leaves us with. It's this incredible, complicated tale, right? On one hand, you have the founding of an order for women, born from sheer persistence. But on the other, it's an order that was founded with these built-in rules of subordination and this dire prophecy hanging over it. And it really leaves you wondering, how should we look at this? Was it a monumental victory, or was it a painfully constrained beginning?